Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here on another social media office hours. And I never like it when people have like former in their bio, but it's unavoidable with Scott because he's the former uh, PR social media chief at Ford Motor Company. But what I'm more excited about for Scott is what he's doing now. And if you don't know Scott, he's an incredible intellect, a true thought leader in our space. I've said to many people, I've posted on Facebook many times that his weekly digital overview, his newsletter, is a must read. It's one of the few things I read on the web word for word. So if you haven't subscribed to Scott, please do so. It's can't miss. So in a way, this is really cool, Scott, because it gets into our topic. A few weeks ago, I noticed that you started this thing on your newsletter called Patreon, where people could push a button and contribute a few dollars. And I jumped at the chance because I thought, wow, I get so much out of this. I want to reward Scott. I want to thank him for all the effort that he's doing. It was kind of an unusual new way of monetization. So and now I've put it on my blog as well. So let's start there because a lot of people have questions and maybe even a little controversy about this. How's this working for you? Why did you do it and how's it working out for you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark, for subscribing. It means a great deal.
And what's that thing on your shelf behind you? Is that like some kind of decoration? Christmas decoration? It's a Santa?
But he's wearing a deer.
Okay. I see. It looks a lot menacing. It looks a lot menacing up close.
Jingle, 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 you will hear my sleigh bells ring.
I had no idea we'd be getting that kind of. Look at this, folks. All this entertainment value in one place today.
Well,
so tell me about Patreon.
You know what is. First of all, thank you, Mark, for subscribing. It means a great deal. Like a lot of things that I experiment with and that I try out on my professional site, I actually tried it out on my hobby site beforehand, just to see how the real world would respond to it. And Len Edgerly there has a comment that I'm a noted Sherlockian. And that's the site that I tried it out on first. I have a site called I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. And this is for people that like Sherlock Holmes, and they're not terribly technically minded. And when I saw a Patreon come up, it's almost like a Kickstarter for fundraising. It's like an NPR model, right? You can give however much you want over time. There's no required subscription fee. It's just that if you feel like you're getting value from something, it's up to you to show what you want to give back. And then at Patreon, this is what I found really compelling. At Patreon, they allow you to select levels where you can actually reward your patrons for their kindness. So
I like that one level where you could like go on a date with you. That's very inventive. Very inventive.
Haven't had too many of those,
I chose not to go there.
It could be a good steak dinner in your future, Mark. You never know.
Yeah. You never know. Are you inviting me?
Well, hey, all it takes is 2 months.
Is this my first Patreon date?
Hey, imagine that if Tinder and Patreon teamed up and had a baby, that's what it would look like.
Come on, this is a family show.
I'm just leaving it there.
So let me ask you. Two amazing things happened when I started getting patrons on my blog.
Okay.
Number one, I was overwhelmed by the kindness and people coming on saying, thank you, you've given so much to me. And here was something interesting, Scott. Half the people who subscribed, I had never heard of before.
Half of your new patrons, you mean?
Yes. So this is like my alpha audience, my greatest fans kind of came out of the dark. Yeah. Said, hey, I'm out here. I get a lot from what you're doing, and I want to thank you. I started this closed Facebook group for this elite group of people who've kind of said, I'm a super fan. And that has been amazing. We're getting to know each other and we're learning from each other, and they're kind of getting inside insights into my business and my work. Here's a second thing that happened. There was pushback that kind of surprised me. And there were two main comments. I won't go through all of it, but here's 2 comments I'd like you to respond to, see if you got anything like this. Yeah. And then I'd like to invite others to come in and ask questions about this or other content monetization forms as well. We're just talking about Patreon because it's so new and it's kind of been on our minds. First piece of feedback was, geez, shouldn't a blog be at the top of the sales funnel, helping you get leads, not providing money to you? What would be your response to that?
Well, I don't think it belongs in any single place. And yes, it's a very, very valuable lead generation tool. It's also a valuable thought leadership tool. And when you think about other tools for thought leadership that are out there, things like some of the more thought-heavy magazines, maybe The Atlantic, The New Yorker, The Economist, people willingly pay for subscriptions to those. Why? They're providing value. They're providing
But
stuff.
That's different.
Well,
I mean, you and I don't have a subscription.
True.
Yeah, this is not, and I want to be clear about that. There is no paywall. Nothing changes for me. Nothing changes for you. If you enjoy my blog for free, you'll always enjoy my blog for free.
Exactly.
But this is a way to give back. I mean, my reaction to that comment was, first of all, who made the rules right. that a blog should only be at the top of the sales funnel? Tons of people make money from blogs. Tons of people make careers from blogs. And I mean, the other thing, I guess, for me is my blog, and I think this is somewhat for you as well, my blog is not just a business blog. I mean, I'm a teacher.
Right.
And I want to teach. I want to do more. And I want to open up my blog. I want to do more. I've got ideas to create new kinds of content. But from a business standpoint, I can't really justify it because a blog is also a very, very expensive little thing to accommodate. The other interesting reaction, negative, is that, well, it's not like a blogger is an artist. I can have an emotional connection to an artist. I can't. Why would I? I can't have an emotional connection to a blogger. Wasn't that surprising?
Well, then they're clearly on the wrong site. If you're not,
right, I'm not for you, baby.
Right. I mean, look, if you're not evoking some kind of visceral emotional reaction from someone, even if it's to say, I violently agree or I violently disagree with whatever points you're bringing up or thoughts that you're sharing, that's emotion. That's some kind of connection, right? It doesn't have to be quote unquote art, right? Art comes in lots of different forms. Over on my Sherlock Holmes site, we are giving people the option to pay per podcast episode, right? We don't produce an episode, you don't pay anything, right? It's as simple as that. And again, it's still free for everybody who wants to consume it. It's still free. It's the National Public Radio model.
Yeah. Well, I think that's exactly right. Everybody can enjoy the content from National Public Radio, but it's something I believe in and something I've been following because if you look at content in general, if you look at our press, our newspapers, our television stations, our magazines, many of them are dying. Daily newspapers are dying all over the world, and we need a free press. And so I think this patronage model is one of the reasons why it's so interesting to me, is because I do think this National Public Radio type of model, I can see this funding investigative journalism.
It could.
I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Here's the thing, though, Mark. If I don't receive any donations through Patreon, I'm not going to close my doors, right? No. And this is the kind of thing that's going to allow me to quit my day job either, right? It's something that it pays for the hosting costs. It shows some kind of exchange of value. But to your point, if you can fund something specific, and again, that's another thing I like about Patreon is that you can say, look, if we get to a certain level, we will blank. We will open up an investigative journalism arm.
Yeah.
We will, whatever it is that's in your practice that you want to do, you can accomplish that if the community bands together to help you do that. Hey, one of my
I want to welcome Justin
Hello.
Maxwell.
Hi, yep.
Justin I'm delighted that Justin is here. He's going to talk a little bit about a new concept he has around micropayments. Now, this was quite interesting to me. Justin came to my attention through a friend from the blog, and I've always wondered, why don't micropayments work? And I'm pretty good at seeing how trends come together. And one prediction I made that totally fell flat was a few years ago, Facebook introduced these credits, these little micropayments. They're almost like chips you can spend. I thought, here's the answer. People can spend these microcredits for content, for music, and it didn't work. So, Justin, tell us why hasn't this worked in the past, and why do you think there's still a future for micropayments?
So the best evidence for why it hasn't worked in the past is because when it comes to these little tiny amounts of money, the transaction is so small that it's far too easy for it to be disrupted or blocked by any kind of external factor. Like here's an analogy for you. If you're walking through a park and there's a busker and he's playing a song you love and he's playing it well, and your hand goes into your pocket and you only find notes, you probably have $1 notes over there, but you just carry on walking. If you've got coins in your pocket and there's a crowd of people between you and the busker, you probably just carry on walking. If the intent to complete a transaction that is only worth 50 cents or less to you,
sure,
any little thing can stop it from occurring. There's a couple of guys who have written about this in the past. One of whom, Nick Szabo, talked a lot about these cognitive costs. When it comes to the payment side, there's even this instinctive thing that not just we but other animals do, which is we immediately evaluate things for fairness. So if you're presented with a price for something, which could be one token, could be 25 cents online, you don't know if it's a pre-purchase payment, whether it's worth 25 cents or 20
what's
cents.
different? So what's different? Okay, so Facebook tried it. Other big companies have tried it. What makes you think things are different now?
Okay, so we have the emergence of the sharing economy, whatever that means, but that's a thing. People seem to be generally more waking up to the fact that you need to give something back. On top of that,
I don't know about that. I mean, I don't think our DNA has changed. I don't think people are more benevolent than they were 10 years ago. So what's changed?
Benevolent. I think online people are perhaps becoming a little bit more conscious, and I think the emergence and success of Patreon, who I love, they're great. I think that's a representation that's a factor at work. There's also the emergence of cryptocurrency.
So what's different? Different? What's different about your technology or about your idea?
Yeah, well, what's different about our idea, not so much about the time, but is the complete stripping away of all of those cognitive barriers by getting you to pre-agree that this is a certain amount that I'll be prepared to spend without a second's thought. So it's a different approach. It hasn't been tried before, but by getting you to say, okay, every time I click one of these buttons, and you can only click it once for any piece of content, that's going to cost me an amount that I've already decided. I don't have to think about this when I spend this particular amount of money. And so it unlocks that freedom because you've already pre-purchased these. You've consciously chosen, right? This is the amount. I'm happy that that's big enough to give to somebody as a kind of a crowd donation, a bit of a busking money in the hat sort of thing. But not so much.
I like that idea because basically you're filling people's pockets ahead of time. But you're introducing a new obstacle, which means they need to go to your site and fill their pockets. So
the initial sign up, which everybody, all of us in this game have, and the key to that is obviously partly making that as simple and fluid as we possibly can. So it takes, a couple of minutes to get from the first time you hit our site to your first payment, because obviously we give people a couple of tips to get them started with.
So what's the name? What's the name of your site if people want to check you out?
So it's Tibit.com, Tibit.
Tibit. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll be hearing more from Tibit. I'm cheering for you guys.
Yeah.
I'm skeptical because if Facebook can't make it work, I don't know. But I'd love to see.
I'm a huge fan of Patreon, and I'd like to see us become kind of the casual payment variant of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Mark,
Awesome.
from a psychological standpoint, from a human behavior standpoint, I think what Justin is talking about is that this frictionless giving. It's really interesting, and I think we're already predisposed to that kind of thing, because I went over to my desk to grab my phone. How many people here use a Starbucks card on their phone? Right, you preload it with whatever, $25. And when you're in the store, give me one of those, give me a bagel, whatever, and then you just hit the app, and the money's gone, right? And you don't think about it until you have to recharge it. And of course, you're going to recharge it because it's something that brings you value. And it doesn't matter whether you're buying a coffee or paying for everybody in line, it's frictionless.
Well, it's interesting. Our topic specifically today is about content, and I think people are conditioned to pay something for coffee, but in terms of music and art and poetry and writing, even if it's a blog post, which I think there's artistry in blog posts. There's artistry in the work that you do for sure. I do wonder if, especially with the millennials and below the millennials, if we're being conditioned in some way to just to almost be shocked, like, how could you possibly ask me to pay for content? So we've got Professor Joyce Sullivan in the house. What's on your mind, Joyce?
Hi, Mark. So thanks for letting me join in the blog. And Mark, I'm a huge fan. And Scott, I'm giving you some shout outs. I love your Monday.
It's the best.
It's awesome.
It's the best.
So trust and paying for great content. As Mark, I commented on your blog the other day about trust, Anna, Mrs. O around the world, how to take great content and believe that your followers trust you and know that what you're sharing is genuine. So, I've had my own, I teach at Baruch College. I have my own consulting business. And when I started after leaving financial services, I had a lot of opportunities to be a middlewoman, or to sell somebody software. And I said, you know what? My clients hire me because they know I'm going to give them what I think is best for them. And I left money on the table because frankly, that is the short run. It's the long run, which of course, when you're looking to pay the electric bill, matters. But by building that trust, and because people now have the ability with a smartphone in their hand to talk to the world, who's trustworthy immediately. There's no more hiding. So as Mark knows, I teach a course at Baruch College, social media communication, and I use TALF Twitter to introduce students to the ability to share their genuine voice. So I'm a big believer in, there's people like Mark and now Scott that I'm following you, that there's content that I value and I know that I am getting value. When I'm looking at my budget of things I'm spending money on, I do subscribe to some Patreon. I've just started to, if there's a Kickstarter. So I do have a certain amount of money that I have available that I am choosing to give to different providers of content I value. And it's value that is not bought. so to
that's
speak.
great.
So I don't know if that
think
makes sense.
I think that's an important distinction, Joyce, and that's one of the reasons why I did the Patreon thing. I'm not going to have sponsored content. I mean, to me, that trust and that integrity, I'm just not going to go there. And yes, I could be making a lot of money off of sponsored content. I get 3 or 4 pitches a day probably. But I mean, to me, it's just I can't, once you cross that line, you're an ad, and I just philosophically can't get myself there. I think in the long term that there's going to be more value to me. But I don't judge people who need to feed their family. You got to do what you got to do, but there is a risk. What do you say about this, Scott?
Well, it's interesting because I think this distinction between regular content and sponsored content is an important one, and it's something that's built beyond Patreon, certainly. But one of the levels that I chose to feature in my Patreon menu was a sponsorship slot in my newsletter. But typically, the people that are taking the step to say, yes, I want to support you on Patreon are people that I already have a relationship with. You know, the point that Joyce just made about trust, really, really important. And they come to me and they say, yeah, I want to support at a level where I can get my message out. Well, guess what? I'm not just going to accept that and really put anything out there. It has to be something that I believe in. And I don't know how many of are familiar with Paul Harvey. But if you remember Paul Harvey News and Comment, every time he opened a new page, there would be a sponsor at the top of the page, and he would do the read. And it was always a product that he personally believed in or personally used. And that kind of personal connection and endorsement mattered a great deal to the 20 million Americans who trusted this guy with the content he was providing every day.
I think Steve Farnsworth is on. I don't see his picture, but Steve, are you on?
He's pulsing.
Steve? There he is. What's going on, Steve?
Not much. Just trying to stay out of trouble. Listen to you guys talk a lot of trouble.
No. You're not going to stay out of trouble listening to us.
Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Steve? Good to see you.
It's a pleasure. You know, I was just thinking, I wanted to say one thing. It was like, I've done sponsored content, and I disagree with you, Mark, in the sense of like there's that line. However, sadly, having had sponsors for content, I've had a really good experience. And when there's a change in management, I had a really bad experience because they really wanted to dictate a lot of what I said, including my style and that kind of stuff. And so I think it's possible to sponsor content, but I think it's really hard because the only times I've ever accepted it and would is like if I'm writing stuff that's supportive of what you're doing, that's great. But if you want me to write something that's not something I truly speak to or believe in, that's a problem. And that's, so I don't really pursue it. I don't pursue sponsored content really anymore. I do work with clients, but that's different. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Scott.
Editorial hand, right? When you're given the choice to be able to accept or reject something, when you can make it your own, right? As soon as it stops sounding authentic, you've lost your audience and you've lost your purpose. You have to stay true to yourself in any content that you create, whether it's sponsored or whether it's your own.
Yeah, I have a good relationship with Dell, where I'm creating content for Dell, and then after I publish it, Dell publishes it. I republish it on my site.
Right.
But there's no editorial restriction. And I had long talks with them about that too, and they've come to kind of see the benefit of that. But I just, you got to believe in me, and you got to believe in my content. Once you start dictating product placement or something, then it's over.
Yeah, and that's a hard conversation to have. I mean, a lot of companies, and I think this is probably one of the greater problems with content at large from big companies, is there's still that really sensitive, maybe it's a holdover, maybe it's just the natural dynamic of it, but people still want to talk about themselves. They want to talk about what they're selling and not about what they know. Mm-hmm. And that's still really hard for people to get their heads around because they can't imagine why they'd spend a nickel or a resource minute creating content that doesn't talk about how fabulous they are.
Right. Yeah, it's part of really the change in the mindset. in the culture that we need to have for content marketing. Well said, friend. Good to see you. Hey, we've got Janet Kennedy.
Hey, Mark and Scott.
Hey, Janet. Yeah,
Hey,
what's on your mind?
Well, I wanted to share that I actually signed up for a program. I think it was launched via Indiegogo because it's a .org, and it's called Sent Up. And I think I put $22 in the kitties because they keep telling me you've got 2,200 cents you can use. And the idea was for creatives and bloggers and artists, you like somebody's stuff and you can just tag their website and send them a few cents. The problem is no one has signed up for the program. I don't know anybody. I have never used any of the content. I've never experienced what that person can give. So I'm still sitting on 2,200 cents that I haven't pushed forward. So the problem is, getting the easy adoption on the other side. Getting the people you want to actually give the money to.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Working with the smartphone. That was fun.
Well, Janet brings up a great point, and that is as something that I kind of mentioned earlier is it's the mindset and the culture of expectations around content and monetization. And even that kind of shocking comment I got, why would I pay for content? That's not art.
Yeah, I'm surprised it turned that controversial that quickly, Mark. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you don't believe in it, don't pay.
Right.
or don't read.
Right.
I mean, it's a choice. You're giving people a choice. I don't know if you've followed the site Stratechery by Ben Thompson. Really
doesn't ring a bell.
Every Wednesday he comes out with a really deep piece on strategy and technology and where the two intersect. The other 4 days of the work week, he does have content, but it's only available by subscription. Right? I know we're moving over into a subscription model here, but again, that kind of thing where he's hooked you on the free, and if you want more, it's there if you want it. If you want to pay for it.
So, I mean, how long has he been doing something like that? I mean, because the other thing is, I had an interesting conversation with this young musician, and he said, well, there's all these monetization opportunities on the web. Look at what Radiohead did. Radiohead was selling music off their website, and you just choose the price, and, they made all this money. And my point was, first of all, you've got to be Radiohead.
Right.
That you've got to have that leverage. You've got to have that power in the marketplace.
Right.
You've got to have that exclusivity before you can dictate monetization opportunities. Right. So in this case, here's this. Do you think? I guess he's been successful monetizing this content about strategy.
I don't know exactly what his entire business model looks like or how many subscribers he has, but I know it's a very popular site, and I get great value out of the every Wednesday post that he does. But look, how long have you been blogging, Mark?
7 years.
7 years. Okay, I've been blogging for almost 10. Right? You and I just started trying out Patreon, and yeah, it's because it was just available, but we didn't go out of the gate monetizing. We built up a core audience. We built it like Radiohead, right? They couldn't have just started out as an indie band saying, pay us whatever you want.
I mean, people often call me the Radiohead of bloggers. It's all over. Just Google it. You'll see what I mean. I mean, Radiohead of blogging. There I am.
Now, looks like we have a question in the question section from Scott. Can Patreon be used to provide ad-free content to patrons while displaying ads to non-patrons? It's a great question, and the answer is yes. And you can even, when you go onto Patreon, they allow you to create a post. And what I do is I basically recreate my newsletter, recreate my blog post, and I strip out all of the stuff that isn't relevant, and I post that. And then they give you the option to post to everyone, to the world, to just your patrons, to patrons at a certain level and above, right? So it gives you a lot of granularity in when and how and where you put your content and who actually sees it.
Mm-hmm. What about some other monetization options? I know you have ads on your site, and I mean, how are you approaching that?
And they're text link ads. They're in the sidebar. So, from a mobile perspective, no one's really seeing those. I joined a network a few years ago, and I simply said my site's available if anybody wants to take an ad out. I don't actively promote it, and I usually have 7 to 8 per month, and they're long-term customers, and they seem to be happy with it, and it doesn't really disrupt the flow of my content at all. It's there if you want it. It's there if you want to ignore it, right?
Well, here's one of the pressures on content monetization that no one's really talking about. I'm talking about it, but I haven't really seen this thread too much on the blogosphere. And it's this, that Facebook and LinkedIn are becoming publishing platforms. They don't want links to your content anymore.
Right.
Facebook wants to become the internet. LinkedIn wants to drive publishing and engagement. And so just even a year or so ago, these were pretty reliable distribution channels where you could post a teaser or a link to something and people would go back to your blog. They'd see your website. They'd see your ads. Maybe there's an opportunity for indirect monetization. So they'll say, oh, wow, I'm going to hire Mark for a workshop. I'm going to hire Mark for a speech. I'm going to hire Scott for consulting or something like that. Problem is, Facebook doesn't want links anymore.
Right.
They want the content. LinkedIn wants the content. These content magnets that we've had on our site, the direction is changing. Facebook, LinkedIn, they own the magnets now. They're drawing the fans and keeping them there because the metric that they're worried about is dwell time. Right. They want people to spend lots and lots of time with the content on Facebook and LinkedIn and less time on your website or my website. So again, this idea of patronage is appealing to me because it's kind of like, dude, whatever happens, wherever your content is, we're there. We support you. Whether then, who knows what's going to happen to, the effectiveness of ads and other things that we have on our site, indirect monetization like speaking, consulting, teaching, I won't say it's going away, but that opportunity is going to be diminished. It's diminished now. It'll be diminished a lot more 12 months from now.
Well, of course, Facebook wants you to advertise on their site. And normally, what are you advertising? You're advertising your own content, right? I was just on a call this morning. I'm going to be presenting a day-long seminar on all aspects of content marketing next week out in Phoenix. And I was on a prep call this morning, and the notion was if we are a media entity, let's say you're a radio station or a magazine, most of what you're promoting on your Facebook page, let's stay with Facebook for a moment. Most of what you're promoting on your page is your own content. However, and you have advertisers too. Could be a local car dealership, let's say. They have their own Facebook page and they're promoting their own content. But what if you could do a sponsored content play, not on your blog, not on your site, but within Facebook? So your Facebook ad is now supporting the content of your advertisers, right? That works organically too. You can arrange a deal where you're kind of mentioning each other's content, but then you can do it paid as well to really promote that. So I think we're only at the beginnings of the creativity and the differentiation that we're going to see in advertising models on Facebook and outside of Facebook.
Well, the thing that concerns me there, Scott, and I agree with you, and that's the thing that's most exciting to me, is that this pressure for monetization, the pressure to be seen in this world of overwhelming information density is going to forge new content models, new monetization models, new platforms, new content types, new strategies. It suggests we're going to need new skill sets. So it's a very energizing time for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But I think the general trend is that as Facebook and these publishing platforms become more powerful, the money is going to flow in their direction, not our direction, unless you're either A, huge, like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, where Facebook is saying, hey, we're going to split the revenues with you,
Yeah.
or you're indispensable. Maybe like this fellow, who is creating the blogs on strategy. I mean, his advice is just seen as indispensable. I don't care about Facebook. I don't care about LinkedIn. I'm going to, I'm going to subscribe to this. So it's kind of unnerving to me that unless you're huge or indispensable, you're going to kind of be squeezed out.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, and it remains to be seen how it's all going to play out and what Facebook is going to do about it. And what's interesting is people will always find a way around something. If there's a real conflict, if they don't agree with what something like a Facebook is forcing them into, they will find a way to work around the system, work with each other, work behind the scenes, like you said, find another platform, find new ways of producing content.
Mm-hmm.
So, a question I saw come by here from, looks like it's from Malhar, that there's so much free content available. Do you think people will pay for content only? Well, Mark, as author of the Content Code and coiner of the phrase content shock, what do you think of that?
Well, there was a great quote from Christopher Penn. I interviewed him for my book Return on Influence, and we're talking about is it possible to stand out with content? He said content on the web is like leaves falling from a tree. They're kind of there. It's forever. But if you need a certain kind of leaf for your medication, if you need a certain kind of leaf to survive or to thrive, you would do anything to get that leaf. So I think it again points to this idea that we're gonna have to find some creative new models, because unless you're huge or you're indispensable, the models that are kind of on the fringe, I think they're just going to be collapsed into Facebook and LinkedIn. I mean, I think my aim for my blog is I want to be outside the echo chamber. I want to provide ideas and concepts and lessons really that you don't see anywhere else. I mean, a lot of even something like content shock. I mean, this was a concept and an idea that's being used in a lot of places today. In fact, someone sent me a note yesterday that it was on some big. It was the guy that started the College Humor site referred to this in a post. It's being used in speeches and books and talks, and so this is the kind of original thinking that I want to provide. Right. And I have very, very high standards, even for guest bloggers. Some guest bloggers, and there's people here probably who have suffered through this. I mean, I've sent back guest posts 3 or 4 times until it kind of meets the standards of to be interesting, to be relevant, to be timely, to be entertaining, to be original. So it's difficult to make it on my blog because I want to stand out and create something that's indispensable and exceptional. And to answer the question, I mean, I think that's the only thing we're going to be able to monetize directly. That's not to say you still can't monetize indirectly by people being attracted to your content, and then you upsell them on an ebook or a class or a webinar. And by the way, I think the idea of webinars and paid classes are a huge idea, a huge way to monetize your content today. And the only reason I haven't done it, a lot of people have asked me to do it, Scott, I'd like to hear if you've got any plans on this, is because I don't think it would bring me joy. I think I'd be so preoccupied with the technology, and I don't want to be on the treadmill of continuous classes and updates. It could possibly be very profitable for me, but it's just not something that I would be joyful about. Have you thought about monetizing that way?
Yeah, I have, Mark, and I put a bookmark in it for now. I think I share your sentiment. My problem with webinars, for the most part, is that it's extraordinarily one way. I like being on stage because I can gauge the reaction of my audience. I can see people, I can hear people laughing, right? Yeah. Or I can see heads nodding. And let's hope they're not in agreement.
Sometimes for me, it's better if I don't hear them laughing.
Yeah, right. But yeah,
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but you know how to change your presentation on the fly if necessary based on the reaction that you're getting. I don't get that from webinars, right?
Yeah.
The other thing too is that it's extraordinarily time intensive unless you've already got a preset curriculum.
Yeah.
And look, you teach at Rutgers. I'm sure you could easily take some of that material and turn it into a webinar if you wanted. But again, it comes down to, is it a valuable use of your time? Is it bringing you joy? I mean, what else could you be doing that time takes up, right?
Yeah.
So it's like everything, it's a personal decision, and you need to figure out whether it provides you or your business value.
Yeah.
On the other side,
go ahead.
I also question, do I really have anything worthwhile that somebody would want to sit through for an hour and pay for? That's the thing that gets me. I started doing these live video chats every Sunday night as a preview of my newsletter. I've been given access to Facebook mentions. Okay, so I can do live video on Facebook. And I like that because it integrates with the rest of my Facebook world, right? And then I can take that video and embed it at the top of my newsletter. And it provides a little more in-depth commentary of a couple of items. That's free. And I don't mind doing that and using that to round out my whole offering of the newsletter, which is also free. But I really question whether I have something that people would be willing to pay for and sit through for a whole hour of me just talking at them.
Yeah. Well, that's a really, really interesting question. I do teach, and in next semester I'm actually going to be doing 2 4-hour classes. So people are paying to hear 8 hours of me. That doesn't that blow your mind? But it's true. As astounding as that may be, it's true. And but I just love creating content. If I could figure out a way just to help and teach people and not have to worry about all this, which brings us back full circle because we're running out of time here. Is that's kind of the beauty of the patronage thing to me. I think it's just that simple. I appreciate Scott. Boom. I'm going to give you a financial contribution, and maybe you can use that in a way to be even better. And that's what I have in mind for my own efforts and my own blog. I think it's just that simple and just that not controversial. So Scott, thanks so much for your time today. I feel like we could go for at least another hour, but I'm mindful of your time and the time of the many people who spent their lunch break with us today, wherever they might be in the world, or their dinner break. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And Mark, thank you for ginning this up and for inviting me in. I know there were a lot of comments, a couple of questions that we maybe didn't get to, but feel free to reach out individually, either to me or Mark or both of us. I'm sure I can speak for Mark on this regard. We would be happy to engage with you on whatever platform you like and to continue the conversation.
I answer every comment and every question, or at least I try to. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, and we'll be doing another office hours. I don't have a schedule. Whenever I have an interesting topic and an interesting person, we'll do one, and you can count on it being interesting and fun. Take care.